7 o'clock. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We are currently being broadcast live over Van Buren Television, Channel 12. Clerk Wright, would you please take the roll?
Yes. Trustee Martin?
Here.
Trustee Frazier?
Here.
Trustee Miller?
Here.
Trustee White?
Here.
Treasury Bud?
Here.
Clerk Wright is present. Supervisor McNair?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk. Can I get a motion for the approval of the agenda?
I make a motion we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been, motion's been made by Trustee Frazier, supported by Trustee Miller. Are there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next item is the approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda today consists of the work study session minutes of March 6, 2017, the board meeting minutes of March 7, 2017, the prepaid list of March 10, 2017, the prepaid list of March 15, 2017, and the voucher list of March 21st, 2017. Can I get a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Okay, it's been, I have a motion for approval by Treasurer Bud and supported by Trustee Miller. Do I have any discussion?
I
Hearing.
have one question about a voucher expense for the plane fare.
Let me
Montreal.
ask the point of order.
Okay.
Do we have to move that off of the consent agenda if there's a question?
Yes.
It should
Okay.
have been moved out before it was approved.
Okay, so would you like to amend your motion to move?
I don't think that's items on the voucher list. I didn't see it. I don't
Oh,
think
that
it's,
wasn't?
it's not on the voucher list,
I
Sherry.
had it on the list. Okay,
I don't
all
think
right,
it's-
I withdraw.
What item is it, John?
All right, it's withdrawn.
Yeah, it was on the one before then?
No, there was not a voucher for it. There's not been a voucher.
Oh, there hasn't
Has
been
not been.
approved
Right.
yet. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
I currently do have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Treasurer Bud and supported by Trustee Miller. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We're now at the public hearing moment. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak on agenda items? Hearing none, we're moving forward to correspondence. First, we're going to have a presentation from the Van Buren Township Civic Fund. Treasurer Bud, would you make the introductions?
Were you a correspondent?
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce Mark Lazenges. He's a member of the Civic Fund, as am I, and usually there's about 9 of us. I don't know what happened, but we are here to make a presentation to Van Buren Township, and Mark's going to tell us a little about what the fund does.
Good evening to the Board of Trustees, and thanks for having us again tonight. I know it was just 2 weeks that we were here before for a couple of other presentations. The Van Buren Civic Fund has been proudly in existence now since 2005, based on a $1 million grant from the Visteon Corporation. And in that time, I think we've given away, getting close now to about $500,000 worth of grants to the community to help out Van Buren government, township government, as well as the schools in the area. And tonight is another one of those fine examples that I'm proud to represent the Civic Fund in presenting another grant award to the township. Clerk Wright has written a few grant requests to us, and he wrote another one here that we I think unanimously felt, with very little discussion during our last board meeting, certainly filled the need of helping to fill the needs of the township government by reducing some of the burden of the township government. Clerk Wright requested that we replace 10 laptop computers that are used to support the elections. and provided us with the documentation that we would normally request. And we again unanimously agreed to present that grant, or to award that grant to the township. So without any further ado, I guess I'd like to thank the clerk for his grant request. And on behalf of the Civic Fund, we are awarding a grant. I think it's, help me out here, it's $6,300 for the purchase of 10 laptop computers to help out with the elections. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I should have the check, but I'll just tell them it's in the mail.
It's in the mail, that's right.
And then I guess we also would like to, you could tell us what you're going to do with the computers that are,
Okay. Well, I would just like to say thank you. We are, as some of you may know, we went electronic poll book. We went over to electronic poll book. Approximately, we tested out in 2011, went forward 2012. We're coming up on 2017, which makes those about 5 years old. Anyone that knows life expectancy of a computer, a laptop has reached its life expectancy. We had started current minute problems, some not starting up and functioning like they should during election day. That's the last thing we want to have on election day, is a laptop not functioning. So we made the request to the Civic Fund, and they have honored by replacing those 10 laptops. We will pass those 10 laptops down to the senior department, where it can also be utilized there. They still can be used in training and functions in the senior department. But we really appreciate the Civic Fund for donate these. These will alleviate, put a void in my budget that I don't have to expense for, and keep us going forward without any hiccups. Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
All right.
Thanks again.
Supervisor.
Yes.
I'd just like to say I appreciate the clerk's rights proactiveness to make sure that our laptops are working when the elections are held. That's an important aspect, because we don't want people to be frustrated or turned away from the polls and have any problems. And we really thank the Civic Fund for stepping up and to make the donation to us. If you have other money there, bring it on. And also, without the Civic Fund, it helps the schools and the community and improves the quality of life for our citizens, and we do appreciate that.
Last week, we experienced some pretty severe weather and severe power outages across the township. I have a couple letters of correspondence, and I want to basically read them to thanks to people involved that really did help us out the community and thought about the community first. First of all, Jason Wright, he's our Deputy Director of Police Operations, which is about to be renamed. He's about to get the new name of Chief of Police, and because I don't like the Deputy Director, I get confused by it. He writes, yesterday I received a telephone call from Miss Polly. She wanted to tell me how great two officers were who came to her home during the recent power outage. Miss Polly told me that she did not call the dispatch and believes officers were just in the area, and someone must have told them to check her out. Officer Harrison was the first officer to have contact, and she told him she was okay. However, she could not get her generator running. Officer Harrison made several attempts to get the generator started unsuccessfully. Miss Polly advised me that Officer Harrison left her home and came back a short time later with Officer Sweet. She stated that between the two officers, they got her generator started with the help of a toolbox. She stated it took them about 45 minutes and got it running. Ms. Polly was very thankful to the officers and their assistants and wanted to share that story. We're very proud of our Van Buren Township officers who worked very difficult conditions in doing non-traditional policing during that time. And I am thankful too. I'm sure the board is also. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I was directed to write a letter to the schools and thank them for their opening of the warming center. Dear President Johnson, on March 8th, we experienced a massive windstorm across Michigan, which left over 1 million residents without power. In Van Buren Township, there was well over 10,000 residents that lost power. A drop in temperatures elevated the level of urgency for those affected in our community. In times of crisis, it is imperative to have a shared community-wide effort to assist those in need. I could not be happier to report that this is exactly what happened. In a matter of hours, the following morning, the Van Buren Township staff, in coordination with the Van Buren Public Schools and Superintendent Kudelak, was able to establish a warming center at Belleville High School. We called on, and they helped, were the governments of Belleville and Sumter Township, and we made it a regional warming center. This prompt regional response provided relief to over 100 individuals and families in need. The warming center has enabled people with the ability to get situated, which included contacting friends and family to find a place to stay, charging cell phones, eating a warm meal, showering, and for many even, shelter for the night. On behalf of the Van Buren Township Board of Trustees, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to the Van Buren School Board, Superintendent Kudelak, the City of Belleville, Sumter Township, and those individuals involved in aiding our residents in their time of need. I'm just going to tell you, I didn't really know what a supervisor did until that day. You cannot believe the disasters that we narrowly averted. It began with 460 calls coming into dispatch, where we had to have all hands on deck to try and field the phones. The police had to be sent out to discover where the outages were so that we could figure out what to do. The water pumps from Great Lakes Water died. We had such low water pressure that we were probably within an hour of declaring a boil water alert during a time of power outage. When we finally got that up and running by manual systems through the water tower and through the various areas around the township, the power came back on at the sanitary systems and blew out the sanitary systems. We were in the midst of trying to open a warming shelter. We were using police to go out and find out where the areas that had power outages were and keeping maps. The dispatchers were bringing in dispatch. The supervisor's office was used as a call center, collating the data. The seniors center went out to every Meals on Wheels house and the seniors at risk to get them the word that the warming center was open and provide rides if they needed it. Parks and Recreation teamed up with business development and produced 3,000 pieces of literature, which through the help of the police, we found out where they were, and they provided, we handed those literature pieces out with the people in this building, including DPW and DPS. Cable and IT put everything out on the websites and put it on our cable TV. This was a massive undertaking for this group that had never seen anything like that before. It started the first thing in the morning, and I couldn't be prouder of this group for what they've done. And thank you. That's it. Next is public comment. I went out of order. Is there anybody else in correspondence? Okay. Public comment. Discussion is now open for public comment on new business agenda items. Non-agenda items will be heard near the end of the meeting. If there's any public comment, please raise your hand and I will recognize you from the audience to come to the podium. Any public comment? Hearing none. Tonight we have no unfinished business. New business. We have one item to consider approval of the second, which is the final reading of Ordinance 3717 to amend and replace Ordinance 12115, Article V Coal Tar Products, Section 42151 through 42158, with new Article V Coal Tar Products, Section 42151 through 42159. I'm going to ask for a motion from our environmental liaison. Can I get a motion for approval, trustee?
Thank you, Supervisor. And I would request that we adopt the revised coal tar sealant ban ordinance establishing a lower PAH or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons limit, a seal coat applicator registration and enforced procedures.
Okay, Director Akers, can you give us an overview?
Thank you. Board, as this is the second reading of the ordinance that you have before you, the original coal tar sealant ban ordinance was passed in 2015. At that time, there wasn't an enforcement mechanism put into place. We waited to see what all the other communities would do. We've taken the best options from what people have done across the country and have created what we believe is a reasonable, well-working enforcement mechanism for this ordinance, which does three things. One, establishes a lower PAH limit, 0.1%, an enforcement process that includes misdemeanor and injunctions. So it's basically what you would do if you get you'll basically get a ticket and have to go to the court. And finally, anyone who applies any commercial sealant applicators will have to register with the township for 1 year, or for 1 year, they get a 1 year period registration. And during that time, they sign an agreement that says they understand that coal tar-based sealants cannot be applied in the township and understand what can happen if they do. The last point I'll add to this is to remember that high PAH sealants are carcinogenic and easily transportable by wind, water, and the scraping. And while kids play on the driveway and it has a high pH content, they can ingest that carcinogen. When water falls on these high pH driveway sealants, it can get washed off into our lakes and streams. This ban is this ban and enforcement procedures is the second step in the method that we are going to reduce this threat to our residents. With that, I have listen to any questions you might have.
Any questions? No. Trustee Frazier?
I just wonder if I just want to make sure that there's no difference in price when the commercial person goes to load up his truck for the sealant. The reduced PHA or tar product is the same price as the other, is that correct?
The asphalt-based product, which is the low PAH product, and the coal tar-based product, which is the high PAH product, are about the same price and can be made to be higher or lower quality based on how they dilute the product that they purchased from the original seller. So they're about the same.
So it wouldn't be that much, it wouldn't add additional cost
No.
to the commercial person to put on what we require.
No, and you can get them from the exact same places. So,
In the same, like for individuals, residents, they can get it like at Home Depot or these places, Lowe's or
at
whatever,
Home
Menards.
Depot or Menards, the only product that they have in the 5-gallon buckets for if you want to seal it yourself is the low PAH asphalt-based sealant. So it already complies with the ban.
Okay, well, that's good to know, I think, because, you know, if you have an asphalt driveway like I do, I just want to make sure that they're complying. And the commercial sealant people, they have to register with the township in order to put this down in the township of Van Buren, is that correct?
That's correct. Just like any other building contractor, commercial sealant applicators are going to have to come in and get a yearly registration with the township. They will do that at the building department, where they will pay a $30 fee, fill out their form, show us their contractor license, and then we put them in the registration system. They then sign the agreement that says, yes, we understand that there is a low PAH ban or high PAH coal tar sealant ban in Van Buren, and our company will not apply it. They'll keep a copy of their registration with them so that our ordinance officers can check for the registration rather than check for what type of materials in the tank.
If I may.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said I didn't have any questions, but now it's triggered
Okay.
questions. So if we have a truck that comes through, say, a neighborhood full of asphalt, and they knock on your door, which happens, and they say, hi, can we patch your driveway? We can ask as a resident to see their permit, knowing that it has been registered with the township.
You can ask to see their registration,
Okay.
correct?
Are there any other questions? Trustee White?
Go ahead.
You have another one?
No question.
Deputy Director Best, I am very pleased to be able to vote on this revised coal tar sealant ban ordinance. As most everyone knows, Dr. David Wilson, who is no longer with us, was a prime environmental candidate, a member pushing this, because he was really very knowledgeable about the chemicals that are that have been used to seal driveways. And I'm just kind of sad that he's not here to see this being adopted tonight. And if I'm correct, aren't we among the first local governments in the state to adopt this?
I believe Dr. Wilson is here and with us today, and we were the first community in the state of Michigan to adopt a coal tar ban on sealant.
And to the best of my knowledge, we have several other communities close by that are considering adopting this same ordinance.
They followed suit after we did ours in 2015. 7 communities then proposed and passed coal tar bans for sealant. And now that we're passing this, they're looking at adding some of the things that we're doing to their ordinance as well.
Through the chair. I know there was a lobbyist or advocate that came to the township, also claiming that this was, that it was safe, and that they could file an injunctive relief against the township for writing this ordinance. So, did we ever hear back from her further?
The Miss Lee, Dr. Lee Hooray, who is from the Pavement Sealant Coalition, which is a lobbying group out of Washington, D.C. She contacted us about wanting to talk about the coal tar ban that we were proposing. We gave her an entire hour to speak at an environmental commission meeting, heard all her concerns. Our environmental commission asked questions, and we have yet to hear from her since.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
No, I'd just like to thank the Environmental Committee and the hard work of the Deputy Director and the Director on getting this ordinance in place, and Dr. Wilson for spearheading the movement to get this done. It certainly improves the quality of life for our citizens, especially since we have a lake.
Okay, hearing no more questions. I have a motion for approval by Trustee White. It is supported by Treasurer Budd. It is to consider for the second and final reading a new ordinance 3717 to amend and replace the old ordinance 12115. Article V, coal tar products, section 42-151 through 42-158. With new Article V, coal tar products, section 42-151 through 42-159. This requires a roll call vote. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Trustee White?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Martin?
Yes.
Trustee Frazier?
Yes.
Treasurer Bud?
Yes.
Clerk Wright votes yes. Supervisor McNair?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Reports, I have none. Announcements, I have just a few before I go on to any other announcements. First of all, the if you go online, Waste Management has single stream recycling, and they list out the acceptable materials, and there's a little flyer that we made up for that. And for you yard people, April 3rd starts the 2017 yard waste season, starts April 3rd. And free tire disposal, June 3rd. Free tire disposal, bring it here. I think you're allowed up to 7 tires per household. So if you've got tires in the area, get rid of them. All right. Anybody else with an announcement?
I make a motion.
For non-agenda?
We're not,
We still have one more thing. Okay. No
Okay.
other announcements?
No, there are no, okay, so there are no other announcements. Non-agenda items, we are now calling for public comment on board comment on non-agenda items, then public comment.
I have a non-agenda item I'd like to read. I have a written response that I would like to read, mostly to the public. Before I get started, first of all, I want to apologize to my fellow board members for the last night. I got kind of knocked off my center. I normally don't get to that point. I want to apologize to my directors that was in that meeting also. That's not normally me. First, before I read this, I want to reiterate this is basically a response to my constituents, not to anyone individually. But after reviewing the previous board meeting on March 7, 2017, I found it extremely necessary to respond to the comments and allegations said regarding myself. First, to my fellow board trustees, I would like to add how disappointed I am in a couple of my trustees, fellow board members, in which unfair comments was made in the lack of my presence, and most importantly, without conversation with myself. Not only were the comments unwarranted, but could be considered a defamation of my character. I've learned in a previous education session, which some may say I had go to too many of, that it's the responsibility of the directors to educate the board in regards to their respective departments. It's also the responsibility of the board to educate the public of the business of the township. In regards to my request for reimbursement for a passport was simply because I got the process started by paying for it out of my pocket and felt that because I was acting in the duty of my position as clerk, that I was acting properly to be reimbursed. Never did I think of a personal benefit it may have for future travel because I simply had no plans of traveling abroad other than for this instance. The passport could have been asked to be returned to HR of some sort if it was thought about. It could be, if we thought it would be used personally. I agree it's the trustee's responsibility to act as the judicial form of government, which gives them the absolute right to question expenditures when seen. So when the supervisor contacted me to ask me to reimburse the expenditure, I agreed and thought that was the end of it. I had no idea that my fellow board trustee would attack my character, my integrity, most of all my honesty. I would never think that would lead to being asserted as unlawful or even worse, criminal. Let me assure you that I feel that I must impress upon you that nothing is further from the truth. I have not lived to be over a half a century old without being called unlawful or accused of anything unlawful, and I will not be accepted of being condemned by my fellow board trustee members. Now, for whatever reason they may have, I must ensure to my constituents that my actions are taken with the best of intentions of all time with the people of the Van Buren Township, and I always would never do anything to invalidate your trust that you have instilled in me by making me your clerk. I will always cherish the position you have bestowed upon me with honor and with humility. It was noted that council at MTA was contacted in regards to expenditures. Let it be known that MTA is only an advisory council. I have taken the time to get an opinion from our township attorney, which states as following. I have given that response to the board. It simply reads, you can read it. I'm not going to go through the court cases, but an ending, which is basically the summary of any of the opinion, it states that the Michigan Department of Treasury has posted guidance on what does or does not constitute a public purpose expenditure for public funds. The guideline states that a lawful expenditure includes registration fees, lodging, travel for attendance, and use for public information or educational workshops and seminars. This lawful expenditure was recognized and cited with the approval in the material received from the MTA. The issue of the payment of fees relating to obtaining a passport as a public purpose has, to my knowledge, not been decided by the Michigan court and does not present competing interests. On one hand, the passport will be used to facilitate travel to a previous approved out-of-country conference, which is both informational and educational. And travel expenses are recognized lawful expenditure. On the other hand, the passport is your personal property, which could be used for the next 10 years and potentially assist in your personal travel. Therefore, it is my opinion that an argument and decision could be legitimate made either way on whether the township payment for the passport expense is legally recognized expenditure. However, it is my further opinion that any claim or allegation that you in any way acted unlawfully is completely unwarranted and unsupported. In ending, I would like to say, let me briefly explain the function of IIMC, because there was some comment about that. That stands for International Institute of Municipal Clerks, located in Rancho Cucamonga, California. This organization oversees all training and certification, CMC for Certified Municipal Clerk, and also from MMC, a Master Municipal Clerk. I'm working towards my MMC. In order to attain either of these certifications, you have to achieve designated courses put on by the IIMC. Even courses put on by the state must be certified by them in order to count towards your certification. They are recognized international because they also certify clerks from other countries. I've always been supportive of continued education efforts, and I've also done since my first year as clerk. It's apparent that not only I, but all clerks continue to educate themselves and wish to keep their prospective community abreast of ever-changing laws and procedures. This allows me the opportunity to ensure that my residents are afforded the best voting experience possible when they come to the polls. Again, I think that I want to read this just to clear up any misconception or any miscommunication that might have been, not to plan to blame, but the passport has been reimbursed by myself. Hopefully, that was the end of it. Thank you.
Is there any other comments?
Yeah, I'll go. As I told Clerk Wright last night, he told us he would be reading that statement, and I said I'd be reading one as well. On the evening of March 5th, I was contacted by Sherry Frazier asking me to look at the voucher. She was asking about a passport expense and what my thoughts were. I asked her whose passport, and she said Leon's. And since I was unable to open the voucher list because it just kept buffering, I couldn't open it. I thought this was an expense that was for a startup of passport services that we would give our residents, since we have limited places that we can go and get passports now, that the post offices don't offer that. And Leon and I had this discussion a while back, so I thought he was starting up this service for our residents. I did not look at that voucher list. So when I got into the work study meeting of March 6th, as soon as we sat down, a discussion was started by Sherry Frazier, who asked questions about a passport expense of actually $110 and some other travel expenses totaling $417 and some change total. Also, a discussion was also made regarding prepaid mileage reimbursement expenses. So this conversation circled around voucher expenses. At that work study, it was decided at the March 7th board meeting, that the consent agenda would be revised and the prepaid list would be put under new business for, I thought, further discussion. That was my impression. At the March 7th meeting, John Delaney, a resident of Van Buren Township, came to the podium, asked questions about public comment prior to new business, and Kevin McNamara, our supervisor, gave John Delaney the green light to talk about this international travel issue that he had with expenses and how certain things should be covered and certain things shouldn't, and why we shouldn't be buying passports. So last night at our board meeting, it was said that I had attacked, along with other board members, Leon Wright. And I apologize that you felt that way. I sincerely do. I would never want to put you on the spot like that or to single out. But I feel it was owed an explanation. You were owed an explanation. So Kevin McNamara at the March 7th Board of Trustees meeting explained that night at the board table that the line item for the passport was removed, and Clerk Wright agreed to reimburse the township. Kevin asked for a motion for approval of the prepaid list. Sherry Budd made that motion. It was seconded by, I believe, Kevin Martin, and the supervisor then opened the floor for discussion. And you said there should have been no discussion on that because I wasn't there. And I thought about that for a long time. I really did. And I thought, okay, I need to look at that and really feel where he's coming from. I then, that night, asked how the passport expense was paid ahead, when the conference that I learned wasn't until May 21st. And Sherry, you answered that question. You went on to explain that every voucher list has a prepaid list, which I knew of, but this was expedited because of the time frame that passport was needed. Kevin was provided passport information as to why he actually needed a passport. Okay, of course he needed a passport to travel abroad. I get that. But earlier that day, because of these questions, I called, like I usually do, as all of you who have worked with me these past few years know that I will look into this. I had to figure out where these board members were coming from asking these questions. I called Catherine Mullet, that's who answered, and I asked her, what the question on what the passport issue was. I said, look, can township dollars be spent on a passport? She said, public dollars cannot be spent for private identification. This was also told to Kevin McNamara. He was given the suitcase scenario. You wouldn't buy him a suitcase, you wouldn't pay for private identification. I got clarification, I passed that on. And if you took that as an attack, I truly apologize. I would never single you out like that. And for that, I'm truly sorry that you felt that way, Leon. I am. Kevin went on to explain that Leon did this, asked for this passport expense to be put through because Leon never leaves the country. So why else would he need it if it wasn't for travel for the township? And it was okay to do that, but that he had taken back that position. That's what was said. Comments were made by Trustee Frazier that why didn't Leon use his common sense and research this? And Kevin quickly answered, Leon's not here to answer that question. End of story. And that it was illegal to pay for personal identification with public funds, and a passport was considered public funds. That's how we came to this. And I thought you were owed an explanation along with the residents. So the supervisor said that Leon was not there to answer that question. End of story. But the board had the power to change the policy. He said we can revisit it if we want to. I said that we needed a travel policy that was more fine-tuned. So when these questions came up and when issues came about, that we would fine-tune this policy to address these situations. Kevin went on to explain that Leon did not need backup signatures from the board on this travel, this international travel, since it was approved prior to Linda Combs and Sherry Budd. This international travel never came to a board vote, and nor do we have a policy on international travel. It states in our policy we don't have that we don't give out-of-state travel, but it does not address international travel. So when I was telling Catherine Mullet, she was asking, well, what's your policy on international travel? I said, I don't think we have one. She goes, well, if you don't have one, that should have come before the board as a board action. I said, okay. But since the board approved the budget, it was thought to believe that no signatures are needed and no approval was needed. It was approved in the budget. But we don't have an international policy, so you can go to the board for approval of out-of-state, but never in our policy does address out-of-state. So I see where the communication breakdown was. But a good leader will recognize what the problems are and bring forth a solution. And that's what I tried to do with the rest of the board, who also supported this, Leon, bringing forth a stronger travel policy to avoid confrontations and putting people on the spot. I feel sometimes that, tough conversations are unavoidable, regardless if certain board members are absent or not. But the problem is that sometimes we forget to use the skills that we were taught about having these conversations go smoothly. And I'm sorry, Clerk Wright, that you felt attacked, but I do not agree that I myself did anything out of line that evening. Last night at the work study, Clerk Wright said that I myself, along with the other trustees, attacked him, and truly sorry that you feel that way, while he was absent attending a conference. Look, we're all human, so we walk into these meetings hoping for answers to questions that we feel have a right to ask. But sometimes, unfortunately, it's how it comes through, and then it's taken as attack against someone's integrity. And Leon has high integrity. I've worked with him. But I also have the right to ask questions and not feel that I can't ask these questions. But sometimes, if we're not careful, it can take on the feel of a political debate and things become very charged. And we've seen that during these work studies. You weren't there to feel how charged they were, Leon, but I'm telling you, they're very charging. So it takes good, calm leadership to really look and define the issue and look for a creative solution. I feel that we should always have an open discussion no matter who's there. Any appearance of secrecy, and when you've talked about these issues, it was looked at as a personal attack. That's subjective. Any appearance of secrecy can do serious damage with the trust between our board and the residents who we represent. The board needs to show steps that we have nothing to hide. It was talked about at our work study. It was talked about at our board study. But it doesn't hurt if we reiterate to our residents during a board meeting that was what was previously discussed the night before. Just to recap, any recommendations and outcomes. By speaking up at meetings, it also halts any assumptions that board members are making decisions and changing the outcomes behind the scenes. We never want to give that impression. So, I didn't want to create any stress here for Clerk Wright or anyone else who feels singled out, but I do think we need to keep the dialogue open on this revised travel policy. It was shut down for the right reasons last night and postponed, but we need to keep going with the talks. Although I feel that Clerk Wright is attempting to achieve accreditation, it is noble. And I said that at our board meeting. It's noble what he's trying to accomplish. I absolutely understand that. But until just now, I hadn't been given a direct explanation as to how it's a direct benefit to the township. Keep in mind, last year, and this is why I feel the way I do, it's my opinion, I graduated from the Michigan Political Leadership Program through Michigan State, where they teach public policy. I received a $12,000 scholarship for that. 2,000 of those expenses came out of my direct pocket, of my own. Although I felt that the Michigan Leadership Program had prepared me directly for my role as a township trustee, I also felt that that travel expense and those other expenses that I incurred should never be passed on to the township, although I proudly represent the township during my fellowship. Never did I feel that public dollars should have funded this or my credentials. So I understand people asking those questions. So in closing, I apologize for putting you on the spot. I never meant to do that. I did what you said. I took that CD, I went over it, I went over each frame, and I listened carefully to what I said. I don't think asking the questions that I did was a personal attack on you or reporting what my findings were from MTA. I was also told, after the next day, I got to thinking about the other half of this equation, about prepaid reimbursement mileage. Also, Catherine said you cannot prepay for elected officials prepaid mileage, but what you can do is develop a policy saying, okay, you can't do that. There's problems there with IRS and other host of reasons. She says, but what you can do is create a ad valorem per diem charge. Say, for instance, we give Sherry Budd $75 for the day. That goes towards her expenses. Now, anything over that we owe, if it's within line. If it's under, she has to give the receipts and give back part of that money. I'm thinking that's an accounting nightmare, but we can talk about that when we go to define some of these policy guidelines. So, in closing, I just now got this opinion from Macaulay. Leon did not read it. I'm not going to respond to it because I disagree right off the bat with a few of these things, but enough said about that. We need to move on. But I'd like to revisit this travel policy in the next coming months because we don't need miscommunications like this.
Is there any other non-agenda items? Well, Trustee White.
Thank you, Supervisor McNamara. I have a few issues with this, and I'll be straight up forward. I don't have a letter to read. The approval of this expenditure by 3 board members 5 months in advance or more, in my opinion, is not appropriate. First of all expenditures and all approvals, the primary obligation of 4 trustees is to be the fiduciaries of the township, which means we approve all monies expended. And when 3 board members want to approve something, one who benefits from that, I think it's very, very inappropriate, and I think that should be changed. And when we have special obligations, then have the entire board to vote on it. 3 board members approving that is a violation, and also it goes against the spirit of the Open Meetings Act because you're spending money without involving the other 4 trustees to make that expenditure. We were out of the loop, didn't know anything about it. I did not know anything about this expenditure until I opened the voucher list and it was on the voucher list, and I'm thinking, what the time is this? And I looked at it, and I had a discussion with several people on it, and everything else, and after that happened, I was asked to, we were asked to look at some policies and how we could improve them, and I wrote a travel policy, long travel policy, 4 pages long. Did a lot of research on it. I copied and pasted from several other communities, a couple of local communities, a couple from the state. And as I told Supervisor McNamara in his office, the hard part when you create a policy is getting a proper template to make sure that policy covers everything you want it to cover and is appropriate. And once the template is in place, it's not too hard to write a policy or a proclamation when you have that knowledge in front of you and you can do that. And I think it behooves this board to look at the travel policy, be very judicious about it, and to know and understand exactly how we're going to spend the money. And as all of you know, I'm somewhat of a tightwad, and that's the easiest way to say it. You can laugh, Clerk Wright, you know it's the truth. Okay, and I take it very seriously when it comes to spending our residents' money. Everything that we do should not benefit us personally, individually, or as a group, but be a direct benefit to the residents of our township. And that's what we're here for. That's the reason we set up this, to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. And that should always be our first and top priority.
Are there any other non-agenda items? Treasurer Bud?
I would just like to make a comment. There was nothing wrong by what the 3 people that signed off on, because we did not sign off for the payment of his expenditures or the passport. The only thing we signed off on is the policy that we have now says that they don't encourage out-of-state travel. However,
We don't.
if it becomes necessary and it is viewed as being worthwhile to the employee and to whoever is going to make this, the 3 full-time elected officials can sign off on that. Leon had come and said he wanted to go to the Montreal, to the International Clerks meeting. And so what we signed off on was to allow him to do that. We did not sign off on the other stuff, so nobody did anything illegal. And I really resent the fact that you keep wanting to say that we're doing something illegal. We followed the policy. It was put in place when you were the supervisor, and it has worked. Can it be fine-tuned? Most definitely.
I don't think I
But we
mentioned
have
the word
not
illegal.
done anything. It was signed on
No.
October the 2nd,
Huh?
2012.
October, you're correct. And I don't think I mentioned the word illegal. I didn't say illegal. I said
Yes, you did.
inappropriate.
You
Just
said
a-
inappropriate and illegal, and that's
Just
not
to,
true.
just to follow up, I mean, I read my comment. I really didn't mean for it to get into another whole out debate. I have no problem, I'm sure none of us, looking at the travel policy. Anything can always be added to. Anything can always be done better. Nothing is always perfect. But it's the idea, like Treasury Bud just said, everything that's in our current policy was followed to a T. Nothing was,
There is nothing in the
I'm not
policy.
talking to you. Sorry, Trustee
Yeah,
Frazier.
you're not up.
What I'm saying, I said, everything in our current policy was followed to a T. The policy that I voted on in 2012 that says 3 full-time elected must sign off for out-of-state travel was adhered to. Nobody has dispensed any money for going anywhere as of yet. That hasn't even come through. I know you, Leslie, you're looking for it, but it hasn't even been vouched for. So I've reached out to my clerk. I think Supervisor McNamara noted in the last meeting that the Association of Wayne County Clerks gave a $600 scholarship. They thought that it was a great thing for their president to go to the international conference. They paid for the registration fee, which is a savings of its own. Trustee White, it's in my budget. I have an educational budget, training budget. We always have had one to go to training. My budget hasn't been touched yet, other than what Joanne just went to the Clerks Institute last week. It hasn't been touched this year for anything because of the last training, the last thing I went to, which you guys thought that I was at a conference. I was at a training. I sit on the board of MAMC, I'm the co-chair, therefore, it's all paid for. My expenses are paid for to go up and run the training institute for the clerks. Nothing was, no training, no cost to the township. I'm doing things to minute the cost of things. We just got a grant for 10 laptops. I get donations all the time to go out and do things in the neighborhood, in the community outreach, no cost to the community. I do, everything that I do, I get grants. I try to go out and reach out and get grants to reach out and do good things for the community. And it's just sad when I'm sitting here and I come back from a conference without, just ask me. You guys know me. You all know me. If you ask me, I'll answer your question. I'm not gonna hide. I don't have anything to hide. Just ask me. If you want to know, ask me. My doors are open. Trustee Frazier, you can call me and set up an appointment tomorrow. Trustee Miller calls me all the time. Just ask me. I'd be happy to answer any questions that we all should ask the questions that we want to know, not only from me, but our directors. We shouldn't be sitting here putting anybody on the spot or throwing anybody under the bus, because we have time to call and ask these questions and get answers to them. We have work studies that we do in order to get the answers that we need. And when we get here, we should be displaying information to the public, our constituents, not trying to throw each other under the bus and I got you or whatever. This is the time to educate the public.
It'd be nice
And
to
I-
rewind this time, but yeah.
Through the chair, and I felt I was educating the public when I was reporting back my
I
findings from
understand,
MTA.
I got you.
No attack on you.
I got you. I'm thinking about
Okay, let me-
making you my deputy, because you
Stop, please.
did a good-
You're not gonna like me
just
in
a
a
good
minute,
minister.
but I have the floor, please. So I'm going to go back to Sherry's comment that the 3 full-time elected officials did no wrong when they approved this international travel. But I disagree with that because, respectfully, because what it says here, and this is where the big communication comes in, no out-of-state travel will be allowed. If it is decided that it is vital, and I'm referring to out-of-state travel, and necessary, it needs to be approved, prior approval from the 3 full-time elected officials. But this was international travel. This should have come to a board vote, I felt. I disagree, respectfully, always. I absolutely love you, but.
Okay, trustee Frazier.
Well, it's not about, my job as a trustee is to watch for the fiduciary responsibility to watch the money for the taxpayer. When I went through the voucher list, I saw these expenses. I don't think it's appropriate for any elected official to be out on conferences or training for more than to be away from their duties, which is doing the township business at board meetings. Mr. Clerk Wright has been absent at least twice or 3 times. He's been to training or conferences. And this would be the 4th time, and then the Michigan Township Association will be the 5th time, and it's only March.
Trustee.
Pardon?
He's only missed 1 meeting.
No, he's missed 2.
I was at
Excuse
conference
me.
one meeting and missed the township
Okay,
meeting.
well,
The rest-
whatever.
other meeting,
It's
I
not,
had the right-
okay.
I had the right
I
to take,
have
I had
the
the right to
floor.
take off. but it
I
wasn't
have
at
the
a conference.
floor.
It's her
It
floor.
wasn't
I
at a
have the
conference.
floor.
It's her floor.
I have the
I'm
floor.
I'm actually the only one
Stop.
allowed to interrupt her. Go on,
Okay,
let her go.
I looked at the policy respectfully, and it says no out-of-state travel. It says unless, it has to be,
Signed off by 3 full-time
okay.
electeds.
Out of state.
I had out-of-state. It says nothing about international travel.
I don't think we've ever.
My
hired
job,
international
my
travel.
job, yes, we have. My job is to come up with solutions for problems. I see one of the problems in the township is not looking at our policies on a timely basis. We need to revamp and look at our policies at least every 4 years. It should be a cycle that we look at these policies, and so we don't get jammed up on things like this. This policy is not adequate as far as I'm concerned. I am not for board members going to international travel. I applaud Clerk Wright for making the effort to go to Montreal, but I don't think it should be at the taxpayer's dollar. And I, just like Trustee Miller, she bettered herself by going to the Institute for Leadership, and she paid her own way. And I think the same thing regarding international travel. That's my opinion. I don't think we should be paying for passports. It's a form of identification, and it should not be allowed that a government body pays for identification for an employee. That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
Can I please just divulge me this one comment?
Oh,
I disagree
come. I'm
with
not
the
done.
code of I disagree with your policy
I'm
review
okay.
over 4 years.
Okay.
Our code of conduct really needs to be reviewed right now. So, board code of conduct, sorry.
Obviously, we don't get,
Go ahead.
you know, I mean, I don't know how we even got here. I came yesterday to the work study because Mr. White had put together a talking points for us to discuss as a board on how to improve our travel policy, which I thought was a good endeavor. I want to improve our travel policy so we don't get jammed up like this again. We should have these things in place regarding international travel, prepaid expenditures, and these other things, missing board meetings more than twice if you're at a training or a...
You can't mandate another.
She has the floor.
I'm sorry, okay. Obviously, nobody wants, no, I'm not done. Will you quit asking me that? I'm done.
Take pauses.
Obviously, it's not going to do any good. I think that Trustee Miller took at least 10 to 15 minutes.
Take
I
pauses.
just
I thought
started
you were
it.
done.
Okay.
You're giving, okay.
Excuse me for breathing. You know, it's ridiculous that Clerk Wright had the township attorney get an opinion on the taxpayer's dollar also. I don't think it was appropriate for him to call the township attorney and have him do this work, which at least is $600 worth of work. And to publish it like this, it's at least. And I'm all for everybody getting education and training.
Same here.
I'm all for that. But there are certain times when the training or whatever has to be paid out of our own pocket. We can't expect the township citizens to pay for every expense for a trustee or a supervisor, treasurer, or clerk. It's just not realistic in today's day and age. In case we're not aware, there's a president in office right now that is mandating a budget that will be cutting federal funds to townships and cities, drastic cuts. So we will not be getting the funding that we're used to. It will be reduced. So it's even more imperative that I watch out for the taxpayers' money. That's all I'm saying. And it's nothing to, I think we should be able to ask questions at the board table. We shouldn't take it personal. We should just move about our business. And to ask questions, there's nothing wrong with that. And getting answers. This could have just gone by the wayside. It could have gone by the wayside and been approved, had we not questioned it. Okay,
Trustee
when
Miller,
would it have been
Are you
caught?
done now?
No, when would it have been caught? You said it would have been caught.
Every Tuesday morning, we go through the entire voucher list, and that passport, all 7 of us agree, was a mistake. All 7 of us
Okay.
agree it was a mistake.
I asked Miss Budd about it, and she said that Sean,
You don't really sit and tired of
in
hearing
the
about this
treasurer's
passport.
office
Can we
had
close
to
this
let it go
discussion on this
by.
passport? it's been reimbursed, it's done deal.
I think I
We
had the
still
floor
going
next.
on
and-
and on.
Actually, I'm wondering if, are you done with?
I'm
I
done.
had the floor next. You said you have the floor next.
Go
So
ahead.
in closing, I want to say that I disagree again with your review every 4 years of our policies. It's I'll explain, okay? It's very clear that our code of conduct, board code of conduct, needs to be redefined as well. How we conduct ourselves at this board meeting, at our work studies. We need to all review that, give our input, and live by that. We went through training, you know, Lou Bender, about what we wanted in that code of conduct. The things we didn't want done to us, the gotchas that you mentioned.
This isn't a gotcha.
I'm not saying this is a gotcha, I'm talking about what we put into that code of conduct.
This isn't
Do you remember, Leon, about all the things we wrote out, how we wanted to carry ourselves, how we wanted our board members to treat us? I think we need to revisit that and review that, and that policy needs to be put forth
You're gonna
as
need
soon
to
as
find that
possible. And
policy.
I've told you this.
You're gonna need to find that policy. The only policy we have on the Board of Conduct talks about how the audience is supposed to treat, act.
You know,
I read it 3 times.
You know,
There's
that,
a lot of interesting things in that code of conduct that has
Okay.
nothing
the
about the
Supervisor
board
McNamara,
members.
that's probably because it's no way, the MCL doesn't dictate, you can only suggest how a board should react. Either you're gonna act ethically, or you're gonna act with integrity, or is either in you or it's not. I can't force you or no one to act a certain way. I can only recommend that that's the way we should act.
It was a
And
very
if you-
interesting document.
If you don't wanna do that, you're not gonna do it.
Unfortunately.
Well, it does
That's the
have to do
problem.
with this. It's Board of Trustees Code of Conduct.
I
It
have
also
to-
applies to us. Maybe we need to create a code of conduct.
It should apply
There you
to us,
go.
but
Okay? Maybe we look at Canton's code of conduct. It's very good since we seem to do that.
Right.
So we need a better way to communicate.
we can adopt one, take an oath, and say that we swear that we will act as blah, 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 and that's what we probably should do, but that don't mean, it still doesn't mean that somebody won't go off.
No, really?
Okay, are we all set?
I have a couple of announcements.
Okay.
First of all, I just want to say that Mr. Clerk Wright brought this subject up today to the table. He could have just said to the public, I made a mistake, I asked for I reimbursed the township for the passport and end of story. But he wanted to bring it forth. Okay, we did. I'd like to remind everybody that it's the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, and that I think the Van Buren Township VFW Hall should be contacted, and that we should honor our veterans who participated in Vietnam and bring them forth to get some kind of recognition at the township board meeting. I know in my husband's family, 7 of his brothers served in the military, and 2 of them served in Vietnam honorably, and went through a lot, and the Vietnam veterans did not get the welcome home that maybe they should have got at that time. And I just think, since it is the 50th anniversary, that it be recognized in our township. And we could look at Sumter, I'm sure the VFW Hall has members from Sumter and from Belleville. And also, Dr. McDermott has requested, and I did get in contact with the Recreation Department regarding putting a portable library at Quirk Park. He made one for the city of Belleville. It is by the French Landing Park. What is that park called? Okay, and he put one in there, the Rotary, he's a member of the Rotary, and they put it in. And he asked me if he had contacted the Recreation Department before. I did go down there and speak to the director. Jennifer. And she said that, yes, he had contacted her last year, and they were somebody was going to contact him and get the place in Quirk Park set up. So we want to appreciate the Rotary for, making an effort to get literacy out there to young people and to the community members in the park. So
Absolutely.
there are good things that are happening in Van Buren Township.
Through the chair, can I ask you a question? You remember when Dr.
That's what I'm going to say.
Okay, could refresh us on
Dr.
that.
McDermott did come to the board meeting, and he did ask to do this, and we did approve him doing it.
In some
But it
way,
just never,
it never
got
came to
done.
fruition,
But he-
and then
but
I
he
ran
has-
into him at the spaghetti dinner for the Rotary,
Yeah.
and he brought it up
But
at
he
that
does
point.
have, he did have permission to do that.
Okay.
How do we get that moving along?
Well, when he comes forward.
Oh,
Since we have no
I
other-
did arrange with it by going to the director of the
Okay,
recreation.
do we have
Okay.
any other non-agenda items?
No.
Hearing no other non-agenda items, we have no closed session tonight. Therefore, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Wait, you have to ask for,
The audience, if there's not agenda items.
I am sorry.
Why are you in a hurry tonight?
What do you think?
It's not St. Patrick's Day.
in my travels, I go to a lot of meetings, and lately I've been asked again and again, what are we doing about a fire chief? Firemen from other departments have asked me, last night too, from 2 different departments asked me, and I don't know what to tell them because it's never been discussed at a board
We have an
meeting.
applicant. That applicant is going through a vetting process, which will include, among other things, double-checking references, a psych report, drug testing. And
How
we'll-
did we get,
Pardon me?
how did we get one applicant?
Oh, actually, we had numerous applicants. They were very good.
You posted it on a
We posted it.
statewide.
And we had numerous applicants. Most of them had bachelor's or master's, most of them had fire, all of them had fire experience, high fire experience. I actually can honestly say that the majority of the applicants that came here, I would be tickled pink to get, but we.
How many
very-
applied?
Pardon me?
How many applied?
I don't know, but we interviewed 5, I think it was 5.
And you had a committee that,
We did.
you've never announced to the public what you're
Actually,
doing.
we did, we actually formally announced, but we, the, well.
When did we do that?
Not at any meeting
Long
I
time
was
ago.
at,
What? We did.
not any meeting that I attended.
Okay.
But
And
thank
we-
you for
yeah.
coming forward and
Yeah.
bringing this
And we-
up. We should
yeah.
have talked about this tonight.
And I think.
We had a
that
committee of, who was it? You, the full-time electeds,
Oh, that's
and
right,
the,
that's
the 2 deputy directors of public safety and the director of public safety.
Have we picked anyone yet?
Yes, we
That's
have,
what
but
we just
until they're
said.
vetted, we
Sure.
we
Okay.
don't know.
Coming soon.
Yes. I expect that to actually be within the next 2 weeks, unless they don't pass.
I have one quick question. You had earlier mentioned that you're renaming the deputy director.
I am tired of deputy director.
I'm sorry, did I hear
fire.
you correctly?
You did.
With the heater
I've been
kicking
trying to
on.
find out how I go about renaming the deputy director of police operations and the deputy director of fire operations, and I find out that there is a simple way for me to do it. I actually have the power to do it. So we are going to have a fire chief and a police chief and a director of public safety.
So we have Director Lorraine and then.
Then there will be a
Chief,
police chief and there will be a
Jason
fire
Wright.
chief.
Police Chief Jason Wright. Okay.
Mhm.
All right, thank you. I thought that's what you said, but I
It
want
just
clarification.
confuses things.
Through the chair.
Yes.
That's another area that I think that we need to work on is our hiring practices now that we have a human resource person. Personally, as a trustee, I would like to know in a report or whatever you give us, how many candidates applied, how many applicants were interviewed,
Okay,
who was on the committee that interviewed them.
okay.
And I'd like to see the resume of the person that you're recommending in our
Okay.
packet. And also, I just think we need to be
Don't have a problem with any
forthcoming.
of that.
Okay, I think we need to be forthcoming in all our
This is the most
hiring.
open government I have ever experienced.
You know,
in my life.
I did not get any information regarding the hiring of a new person in any department.
You've never been turned down for any information you've requested.
I don't think
In fact,
I
since
should
November
have to
20th,
ask for
There's
it.
never been a FOIA that's been turned down since November 20th.
I don't
this is
think
the-
I should, I
the
think it should be
Checkbook
routine
is
in our
online, the voucher
practice.
statements, the prepaid lists. I've been in at a half a dozen different governments, and every one of them is not as open and transparent as this one.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I have to agree that I have seen such an improvement with the communication when I request something. Sometimes I don't like how long it takes, but I usually get it, and I have to thank you for that. You have been open and transparent. You give these weekly report to the Board of Trustees, which I find very helpful. But some of these comments that Trustee Frazier mentioned about who, you know, the interviewing process would also be helpful if you could include in the future those in your weekly reports. Please keep doing that. I find
Sure.
that very helpful.
The interviewing process pretty much is set, the process is set by contract. We post, we advertise, we have two constitutional officers that are in our Michigan State Constitution. They have the right to run their departments anyway. You control their budgets, but they're very, very independent according to the Constitution. I'm actually a charter officer. You have more control over me, but not a lot more, but you do. But, so in other words, I would do all these things, but you can't tell her how she's going to interview.
Nobody's trying to
Yeah,
tell you
yeah.
how to interview.
Yeah.
We're simply saying we need transparency in saying who did the interviewing, how many people were interviewed, how many applications. The only reason I found out about the clerk's new position was I went into the office and Joanne, or Miss Montgomery was so helpful in showing me how many applicants they had. I said, how many applicants did you get? Because I was particularly interested in a couple of applications that had been turned in. And she showed me that was forthcoming. But when I said who's on the committee, she said that it's ultimately a clerk Wright who's going to decide it.
And that's from like
So I don't know
1860 in the
who's
state
committee
constitution
was.
that they have that power.
Well, you know, I
Supervisors are kind of a new breed in the world of Michigan.
think it needs to be checks and balances. And I don't think that
You'll have to
anybody,
get a
I'm sorry.
constitutional change on that.
May I?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
A lot of these topics that Sherry's bringing forward are topics discussed at the Michigan Township Association conference. The more classes you take,
We learn.
the better you'll get an understanding of how this office works, how his office works. These are the reasons why you go to the conference, to learn about how local government works. So I hope and I encourage this board to attend those conferences. The more classes you take, the better job you can do and the better understanding you'll have. And if you can't attend the conference, there's plenty of podcasts. In fact, this month, podcasts through the Michigan Township Association are 50% off.
I
Take
read that.
advantage of that.
I
They're
didn't
very
see what I
helpful.
wanted to
So,
take.
And the human resource
and
person
also
did a
on the
good
road
job.
classes all the time. So wherever you can, please take advantage of the training that's available because you'll learn that you'll be able to be well informed. And there is also a book that I encourage the township trustees to read and get. It's a guide to township governance. I am so proud of you for this. Please, if you don't have a copy of this, contact Michigan Township Association.
We all have copies. I mean, they all.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. I was not aware I encouraged you to get these a few months
It's on the
ago.
voucher list.
Great. Read it.
Okay. Non-agenda items. Is there any other questions from the audience?
One. I would like to have a meeting with two of the three of you after this meeting to discuss an issue.
Okay. All right, I'm calling for a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by trustee White, supported by trustee Martin. A motion to adjourn. Motions to adjourn are not debatable. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.